The morning sun peeked through the thin curtains of Liv's apartment, casting a warm glow on the small cactus by her window, the only plant that had survived her irregular work hours. She groaned and reached for her phone, silencing the alarm that had interrupted her too short sleep. Another day, another shift at Harmony. Liv Morgan had been a waitress at Harmony for 5 years now, not because she loved it, not because it was her passion, but because bills needed paying, and Harmony's tips were decent enough to keep her tiny apartment and cover the minimum payments on her student loans. "Morning, sunshine," she mumbled to the cactus as she shuffled to the bathroom. The mirror revealed what she already knew, dark circles under her hazel eyes and hair that desperately needed a wash. She'd overslept, which meant a quick splash of water, teeth brushed in record time and hair pulled back into a messy bun, good enough for the breakfast crowd at Harmony. Her uniform hung on the back of her bathroom door, black pants, white button-up shirt, and the burgundy apron with Harmony embroidered in gold thread. The restaurant's name was a daily irony. That wasn't lost on her. There was little harmony in her life these days, just the steady rhythm of taking orders, delivering food, and collecting tips. 20 minutes later, Liv was power walking down the street, travel mug of coffee in hand, dodging other pedestrians with the skill of someone who was perpetually running late. The morning air was crisp, and somewhere in the distance, a street musician played a melody that made her steps falter for just a moment. The notes drifted through the city noise, finding her like an old friend. Liv checked her watch and picked up her pace. Mr. Reynolds hated tardiness. Harmony was one of those restaurants that tried very hard to seem important. Located in the arts district, it attracted a wealthy crowd, people who came to see and be seen before attending shows at the nearby theaters. The centerpiece of the main dining room was a gleaming black grand piano. Every evening from 6 p.m. someone played, usually Theo, an older gentleman who had once performed in concert halls across the country, but now settled for entertaining diners with gentle classical pieces and the occasional jazz standard. Livy slipped in through the back entrance 2 minutes before her shift officially started. "Cutting it close, Morgan," called Danny from the kitchen. She was the head chef, tough as nails but fair, and one of the few people at Harmony that Liv genuinely liked. But still on time, Liv replied with a quick smile, stashing her bag in her locker and tying her apron with practiced movements. "Breakfast crowd already here?" "The usual suspects. Table 4 wants their coffee extra hot but not too hot again." Liv rolled her eyes. "Of course they do." The morning shift passed in its usual blur. Liv moved between tables with efficiency, balancing plates along her arm, refilling coffee cups, smiling at customers who rarely looked at her face. To them, she was just the person who brought their food, not someone with dreams or a story. Not someone who once sat at a piano bench for hours, lost in music. "Order up for table 7. Danny's voice cut through her thoughts. "On it." By midday, the breakfast crowd had thinned out, making way for the lunch rush. Liv's feet were already aching, but she kept moving, kept smiling. The clock on the wall seemed to move in slow motion. Mr. Reynolds appeared from his office around 1 p.m., clipboard in hand, eyes scanning the dining room like a hawk looking for prey. He was in his 50s, with salt and pepper hair always perfectly combed, and a perpetual frown that deepened when he spotted Liv. "Morgan, table 12 still hasn't been cleared." "Yes, sir, I was just about to." "I don't pay you to about to do things. I pay you to do them." "Yes, sir. Right away." Liv hurried to clear the table, feeling his eyes on her back. 5 years, and he still spoke to her like it was her first day. The lunch rush finally eased around 3 p.m., giving Liv a chance to rest her feet and grab a quick bite in the back. She sat on an upturned milk crate, scrolling through her phone while eating a sandwich Danny had made for her. "You look dead on your feet," said Kai, one of the newer waiters as he came into the break area. "Just another day in paradise," Liv replied, offering him half her sandwich. Kai shook his head. "Already 8. Hey, did you hear about the private party tonight? Big music industry people, apparently. Mr. Reynolds is losing his mind, making sure everything's perfect." Liv hadn't heard. She wasn't scheduled for the evening shift, thankfully. No kidding? Well, good luck to whoever's serving them. Reynolds will be breathing down their necks all night. That would be me, Kai groaned. And you. What? I'm not on tonight. You are now. Reynolds just updated the schedule. June called. In sick. Liv's heart sank. She'd been planning to soak in a hot bath tonight, maybe watch a movie, definitely not spend another 6 hours on her feet. You've got to be kidding me. But Mr. Reynolds wasn't the kidding type, as he confirmed when she approached him about the schedule change. I need my best staff tonight, Morgan. These people could bring significant business to Harmony. Your plans can wait. Your plans can wait. The story of her life for the past 5 years. So Liv worked through the afternoon, took a 1-hour break, and then returned for the evening shift. She changed into a fresh uniform in the staff bathroom, splashed water on her face, and tried to muster enthusiasm for another half-day of work. The private party was seated in the VIP section, a slightly elevated area near the piano. From what Liv could gather as she served them drinks, they were executives from Luminary Records, one of the biggest labels in the country. They laughed loudly, ordered expensive wine, and barely acknowledged her existence. Around 6 p.m., as dinner service hit its stride, Liv noticed Mr. Reynolds checking his watch repeatedly, his frown deeper than usual. She was refilling water glasses when his phone rang, and she couldn't help overhearing his end of the conversation. What do you mean you can't make it? Food poisoning? But the Luminary people are already here. No, I understand you're ill, but this is extremely inconvenient. He hung up and immediately started making more calls, his voice becoming increasingly desperate as each one ended without resolution. Liv connected the dots. Theo, the pianist, wasn't coming. And on tonight of all nights. She watched Mr. Reynolds grow more frantic with each passing minute. The Luminary executives were starting to glance at the empty piano, then at their watches. Something stirred in Liv's chest, a feeling she hadn't allowed herself in years. A memory of fingers flying. Over keys, of losing herself in melodies, of the pure joy music had once brought her. Before the accident. Before everything changed. I need someone at that piano in 15 minutes or heads will roll. Mr. Reynolds hissed to no one in particular as he stalked past Liv toward his office. She stood frozen, order pad in hand, heart suddenly pounding. It had been 3 years since she'd played seriously. 3 years since she'd walked away from the music conservatory after her parents' accident, unable to continue on the path they had sacrificed so much to help her travel. 3 years of pretending that music was just something she used to do, not something that still called to her in quiet moments. But she still played sometimes on an old keyboard in her apartment with headphones plugged in so the neighbors wouldn't hear. Her fingers still remembered. Mr. Reynolds, she said, following him toward his office. Her voice sounded strange in her own ears, like it belonged to someone else. I can play. He turned to her with an expression of utter disbelief. You what? I can play the piano. If you need someone tonight, I can do it. He laughed, a short, dismissive sound. You're a waitress, Morgan. Yes, but I studied piano for 15 years. I was at Westridge Conservatory before... She swallowed. Before I left. Mr. Reynolds stared at her like she'd grown a second head. In 5 years, they'd never had a real conversation, never shared anything personal. To him, she was just employee. Number 12, reliable enough but ultimately replaceable. You expect me to believe that you, a waitress, can suddenly play well enough to entertain music executives? Liv straightened her shoulders. I don't expect you to believe anything. But you need a pianist. And I'm offering to play. What's the worst that could happen? You could embarrass this entire establishment and cost us valuable business, he snapped. Or I could save the evening, she countered, surprising herself with her boldness. Your call. Mr. Reynolds checked his watch again, looked toward the VIP table, then back at Liv. She could practically see him weighing his limited options. Fine, he said finally. 1 song. If it's decent, you continue. If not, you're back to serving, and we make our apologies to the guests, and if this is some kind of joke... It's not, Liv assured him, her heart racing with a mixture of terror and exhilaration. "I'll need 10 minutes to get ready." As she hurried to the staff room to freshen up, Liv wondered if she had lost her mind. 5 years of carefully avoiding anything that would bring back the pain of her lost dreams, and here she was, about to perform for music industry professionals. But beneath the fear was something else. A tiny flicker of the person she used to be, the one who loved music more than anything in the world. The one who played until her fingers ached and her heart soared. That person had been dormant for too long. In the bathroom mirror, Liv stared at her reflection. The waitress uniform, the tired eyes, the practiced smile that didn't reach them. For one night, she could be someone else. She could be herself again. Liv stood in the staff bathroom staring at her reflection. The person looking back at her wasn't just a waitress anymore. She was also the woman who had once dreamed of playing in concert halls. With trembling hands, she splashed cold water on her face and took several deep breaths. "You can do this," she whispered to herself. "It's just like riding a bike." Except the last time she'd seriously played piano was 3 years ago, and now she was about to perform for music industry executives who could probably hear a wrong note from a mile away. Kai knocked on the bathroom door. "Liv, you okay in there? Reynolds is pacing like a caged tiger." "I'm coming," she called back, drying her hands. She emerged to find Kai waiting with wide eyes. "Is it true? You're going to play?" "Apparently. But you're a waitress." She laughed nervously. "So I've been reminded." "No, I didn't mean—" Kai stopped himself. "I just had no idea you played piano." "Not many people do," Liv said softly. It was a part of herself she'd kept hidden, like a precious object wrapped in cloth and tucked away in a drawer. "Do you have anything to wear besides the uniform?" Kai asked, eyeing her critically. Liv looked down at her white shirt and black pants. "This is all I have here." "Hold on," Kai said, disappearing into the staff room. He returned moments later with a deep blue scarf. "My sister left this in my car last week. At least you can dress up the uniform a bit." The simple gesture nearly brought tears to Liv's eyes. "Thanks, Kai," he smiled. "Go show them what you've got." Liv walked back into the dining room, the scarf draped elegantly around her shoulders. The restaurant had filled up since she'd been in the back, and the volume of chatter was steadily rising. At the VIP table, the Luminary Records executives were on their second bottle of wine, occasionally glancing at the empty piano with visible impatience. Mr. Reynolds intercepted her before she could reach the instrument. "This better be good, Morgan," he hissed. "These people don't mess around." "I'll do my best, sir. Your best better be exceptional. I've told them our regular pianist had an emergency, but that we have a special talent filling in. Don't make a liar out of me." Liv nodded, unable to form words as the magnitude of what she was about to do hit her. She approached the grand piano, running her fingers lightly over its glossy surface. Unlike her small keyboard at home, this was a professional instrument, well-maintained and waiting to sing. She adjusted the bench, sat down and placed her hands on the keys. The coolness of the ivory against her fingertips was achingly familiar. For a moment she was 18 again, practicing for her conservatory audition, her mother bringing her tea during breaks, her father sitting in the old armchair by the piano, reading but always listening. The dining room hadn't fallen silent, yet. Most patrons continued their conversations, unaware that anything unusual was happening. This was good, Liv thought. She could warm up without too much scrutiny. She began with something simple, a Bach prelude she had played countless times, letting her muscle memory take over. Her fingers were stiff at first, missing the fluidity they once had, but after a few measures, something clicked into place. The music flowed more easily, each note finding its proper weight and tone. From his position near the bar, Mr. Reynolds watched with his arms crossed, expression unreadable. A few tables closest to the piano had quieted, diners turning slightly to listen. Encouraged, Liv transitioned into Debussy's Clair de Lune, a piece that had always felt like home to her. As she played, the years of waitressing, of pushing down her dreams, of telling herself that music was behind her, all of it seemed to fade away. There was only this moment, These notes, this connection between her heart and her hands. She didn't notice when the first table fell completely silent, diners pausing with forks midway to their mouths. She didn't see when a second table did the same, or when servers stopped to listen instead of clearing plates. What she did notice was the music, how it filled the spaces inside her that had been hollow for so long. How right it felt to be playing again, really playing, not just mechanically pressing keys on her old keyboard with headphones on. When she finished Claire de Lune, there was a smattering of applause from nearby tables. Liv looked up, startled, as if waking from a dream. She'd been so absorbed in the music that she'd nearly forgotten where she was. Her eyes found the VIP table. The executives had paused their conversation, a few of them looking her way with mild interest. Not blown away, but not dismissive either. Neutral, professional, waiting to be impressed. Mr. Reynolds approached the piano, leaning in to speak quietly. "Not terrible," he said, which from him was practically a standing ovation. "Keep going. Maybe something more upbeat?" Liv nodded, already thinking of what to play next. She launched into a jazz standard, something with more energy, letting herself enjoy the rhythm and improvising a bit on the melody. As she played, she noticed a tall man at the VIP table watching her more intently than the others. He was younger than his colleagues, maybe mid-30s, with dark-rimmed glasses and an air of quiet authority. When she caught his eye, he didn't look away but gave a small nod of acknowledgement. For the next half hour, Liv played a mix of classical pieces, jazz standards, and even some tasteful arrangements of pop songs. With each piece, she grew more confident, her body remembering what it was like to perform, to express through music what she couldn't say in words. More diners were paying attention now. Conversations resumed, but at lower volumes, her playing, becoming the soundtrack to their meals rather than an interruption. She saw Kai serving tables with a proud grin on his face, occasionally pointing in her direction when speaking to customers. During a brief pause between songs, Danny appeared at her side with a glass of water. "You've been holding out on us," the chef said, placing the water on a napkin on top of the piano. "Thanks," Liv said, taking a grateful sip. "I'm a bit rusty." Danny snorted. "If that's rusty, I'd hate to compete with you at your best." The suits seemed to like it. Liv glanced at the VIP table again. The executives were eating their main courses, still talking business, but she noticed the man with the glasses was still watching her whenever she played something new. "Who is that guy?" she asked Danny quietly, nodding in his direction. "That's Ben Cooper, according to Kai. Some big-shot A&R director at Luminary. Discovers new talent or something. A&R, artists and repertoire. The people who found and developed new artists for record labels." Liv's heart skipped a beat, but she pushed down the flicker of hope. She wasn't here to be discovered. She was here because Theo had food poisoning and Mr. Reynolds was desperate. "Time to get back to it," she said, setting down her water. As the evening progressed, Liv felt something shifting inside her, like a door long closed was slowly creaking open. Playing again, really playing, for an audience that was actually listening. It awakened something she had tried to bury, and then she did something she hadn't planned. Something that made her heart race with nervousness. She began to play one of her own compositions. It was a piece she'd written during her first year at the conservatory, inspired by the changing seasons in the park near her childhood home. She'd never performed it publicly before. It existed only in her head and on the pages of a notebook tucked under her bed. The melody was simple at first, like the first hints of spring after a long winter. Tentative, searching, but with an underlying sense of hope. As it developed, it grew more complex, weaving in themes of growth and renewal. Liv closed her eyes, letting the music take her where it wanted to go. This wasn't about impressing anyone anymore. This was about reconnecting with the part of herself she'd abandoned. She was so absorbed in the music that she didn't notice how the dining room had gradually grown quieter. She didn't see how servers had paused in their tasks, how kitchen staff had appeared in the doorway to listen, how diners had set down their utensils to give her their full attention. She didn't see Ben Cooper lean forward in his chair, brow furrowed, in concentration, or how he motioned for his colleagues to listen. When she played the final notes, a delicate, questioning phrase that seemed to hang in the air, Liv opened her eyes and was startled to find the restaurant completely silent. For a terrifying moment, she thought she'd made a terrible mistake. Had her playing been so awful that everyone was embarrassed for her? Then the applause began, scattered at first, then building until the whole dining room was filled with it. People were smiling, some were standing, and Liv felt her cheeks grow warm with a mixture of embarrassment and unexpected pleasure. Mr. Reynolds stood near the bar, looking as shocked as if one of his tables had suddenly sprouted wings and flown away. Danny was grinning from the kitchen doorway. Kai gave her a thumbs up as he balanced a tray of desserts, but it was the reaction at the VIP table that made Liv's heart leap. Ben Cooper was speaking animatedly to his colleagues, gesturing toward the piano. One of the older executives nodded, looking thoughtful. As the applause died down, Liv began another piece, her hands steadier now, her confidence growing. For the first time in years, she felt like herself again, not just Liv the waitress, but Liv the musician, the person she was always meant to be. She didn't know what would happen after tonight, maybe nothing. Maybe this was just a one-time thing, a brief return to something she'd given up. But as she played, feeling the music flow through her like a current, one thing became clear. She couldn't walk away from this again. Whatever happened next, music was coming back into her life. She wouldn't let it go so easily this time. As she glanced up during a particularly moving passage, she caught Ben Cooper's eye again. This time he smiled, a small knowing smile that sent a shiver of possibility down her spine. The night was far from over, and Liv Morgan, just a waitress until about an hour ago, was suddenly playing for much higher stakes than she had imagined. The applause faded as Liv began her next piece. But something had changed in the restaurant. People were no longer simply eating their meals with music in the background. They were listening, really listening. Conversations had become whispers, and many diners were turned in their seats to watch her play. It was both thrilling and terrifying. Liv chose a piece by Chopin next, one that had always challenged her technically. In the past, she would have worried about hitting every note perfectly, about maintaining the proper tempo and dynamics. Now something inside her had shifted. The music wasn't about perfection anymore. It was about expression, about letting go of the person she'd been, pretending to be for the last 3 years. As her fingers danced across the keys, memories flooded back. Hours spent practicing in the conservatory's rehearsal rooms. Her piano teacher, Mrs. Chen, tapping a pencil against her music stand, saying, "Don't just play the notes, Liv. Tell us a story." The warmth of her parents' small living room as she practiced on their upright piano, the smell of her mother's cooking wafting in from the kitchen, her father sitting quietly in his favorite chair, eyes closed, listening with a small smile on his face. The day she'd received her acceptance letter to Westridge Conservatory. The proud tears in her mother's eyes. Her father's bear hug that lifted her off the ground, and then the phone call that had changed everything. The rain-slicked roads. The accident that took them both while they were driving to hear her perform at her first major recital. The guilt that had followed her ever since. Liv hadn't realized she was crying until a tear dropped onto her hand. She blinked rapidly, forcing herself back to the present, to the restaurant, to the music. Her fingers never stopped moving, finding the keys even through her blurred vision. She poured everything into the piece. Her grief, her guilt, her regret at walking away from music, her joy at finding it again. The melody soared and dipped, telling her story in a language more honest than words could ever be. When she finished the Chopin piece, the silence was profound. Then came the applause, louder this time, with a few cheers mixed in. Liv ducked her head, embarrassed by the attention but warmed by it too. She wiped her eyes quickly before looking up with a small smile. At the VIP table, Ben Cooper was now in deep conversation with the older executive beside him, both of them glancing her way occasionally. Mr. Reynolds stood nearby, looking like he couldn't decide whether to be shocked or smug about his waitress's hidden talent. Kai appeared at the piano with another glass of water and leaned in close. Whatever you're doing, keep doing it. I've never seen the place like this. Liv took a grateful sip. Is Mr. Reynolds mad? Kai laughed. Are you kidding? The bar just sold more expensive whiskey in the last hour than they usually do in a night. People are staying for dessert instead of rushing out. He's probably calculating your raise as we speak. She doubted that, but it was nice to imagine. Dandian, luminary guys seem interested, Kai added with a meaningful look. They're just being polite, Liv said, though her heart quickened at the thought. Polite doesn't usually involve taking videos and texting them to people, Kai replied, nodding toward the table where one of the younger executives was indeed holding up his phone, capturing her at the piano. Before Liv could respond, Mr. Reynolds appeared beside them. Don't stop for too long, Morgan. The crowd's loving it. Yes, sir, she said, turning back to the piano. For the next piece, she chose something more contemporary, a film score that had always moved her, with its haunting melody and building intensity. As she played, she noticed more people taking out their phones, recording snippets of her performance. It was surreal. Just hours ago, she had been taking orders and carrying plates, invisible to most of the people who were now watching her with rapt attention. Halfway through the evening, during a short break, Danny brought her a plate of food. You need to eat, the chef said firmly. Can't have you fainting at the piano. Thanks, Danny, Liv said, suddenly realizing she was, in fact, starving. That piece you played earlier, Danny said, lingering, the one before the Chopin. I've never heard it before. Liv felt her cheeks warm. It's, something I wrote a long time ago. Danny's eyebrows shot up. You wrote that? Seriously? Liv nodded, taking a bite of the pasta Danny had brought her. You've got some explaining to do later, the chef said, pointing a finger at her. 3 years I've known you, and you never once mentioned you were some kind of musical genius. I'm not, Liv began, but Danny was already walking away, shaking her head in disbelief. As Liv ate quickly, she noticed Ben Cooper getting up from the VIP table. Her heart skipped as he began walking in her direction, but then he veered off toward the restrooms. She let out a breath she hadn't realized she was holding. What did she think was going to happen anyway? That a music executive would hear her, play and offer her a recording contract on the spot? Things like that didn't happen in real life, and yet, the way he had been watching her, the way he had spoken to his colleagues while pointing at the piano. It made her wonder. Setting aside her half-eaten meal, Liv returned to the piano. This time, she decided to play another one of her compositions. Something she'd written during her darkest days after losing her parents. It was a piece about grief, about finding your way through the fog of loss, about learning to breathe again when it felt impossible. The melody was sparse at first, tentative notes searching for meaning. Gradually, it built, finding moments of light amidst the darkness, moments of hope amidst despair. It wasn't a happy piece exactly, but neither was it without resolution. It was honest, the musical equivalent of saying, "This hurts, but I'm still here." As she played, Liv found herself thinking about all the moments that had led her here. Dropping out of the conservatory, taking the waitressing job as a temporary measure that had somehow become semi-permanent. The nights spent in her tiny apartment, playing softly on her keyboard with headphones, telling herself it was just a hobby now, nothing more. The piece reached its emotional climax, a passage that always made her chest ache. She closed her eyes, letting the music take her where it needed to go, no longer worried about who was listening or what they might think. When she opened her eyes again, she found Ben Cooper standing by the piano, watching her with an expression of intense focus. She nearly stumbled over a note but managed to keep going, heart hammering in her chest. As she played the final, resolving chords, the restaurant once again fell completely silent. For a moment after she finished, no one moved, no one spoke. It was as if the entire room was holding its breath. Then the applause erupted, louder than before, with people standing, some wiping at their eyes. Liv hadn't realized just how much the room had been paying attention until that moment. Ben Cooper was still standing beside the piano, and when their eyes met, he gave her a small nod of appreciation. Then he reached into his jacket pocket and pulled out a business card, placing it on the piano before returning to his table. Liv stared at the card, afraid to touch it, as if it might disappear if she did. Kai appeared at her side, wide-eyed. Did that just happen? Did Ben Cooper just give you his card? I think so, Liv whispered. Are you going to look at it? With trembling fingers, Liv picked up the card. It was simple, white with black text. Benjamin Cooper, director of A&R Luminary Records. Music finds a way. On the back, he had scribbled a note. Beautiful composition. Call me tomorrow. We should talk. Liv's breath caught in her throat. This couldn't be real. Things like this didn't happen to people like her. People who had given up on their dreams, who had settled for less, who had spent years convincing themselves they were fine with it. What does it say? Kai asked, practically bouncing with excitement. Liv handed him the card, unable to form words. Holy shit, Kai breathed, reading the note. Liv, do you know what this means? She shook her head, not trusting her voice. It means you're not going to be a waitress much longer, he said, grinning from ear to ear. Mr. Reynolds chose that moment to approach, his expression a mix of confusion and grudging respect. The luminary table is asking if you'll play for another hour. They're ordering more drinks and dessert. He glanced at the card in Kai's hand but didn't comment on it. Can you keep going? Liv nodded, finding her voice at last. Yes, I can keep going. As Mr. Reynolds walked away, Liv turned back to the piano, running her fingers lightly over the keys. They felt different now. Not just pieces of ivory and wood, but a bridge to a future she had thought was closed to her forever. She didn't know what tomorrow would bring. Maybe Ben Cooper's offer to talk would lead to nothing. Maybe this night was just a beautiful anomaly in her otherwise ordinary life. But as she began to play again, Liv knew one thing for certain. She couldn't go back to the way things were before. Music had found her again, had awakened something she'd tried to silence, and she wouldn't let it go so easily this time. For the rest of the evening, Liv played like she had nothing to lose and everything to gain, because for the first time in 3 years, that was exactly how she felt. By the time the clock struck midnight, Harmony was still buzzing with energy. On a normal Thursday, the restaurant would have been winding down, servers counting their tips, chefs cleaning their stations. But tonight was anything but normal. Liv's fingers should have been aching after hours at the piano, but she felt nothing but a strange, electric energy coursing through her veins. It was as if a dam had broken inside, her releasing years of suppressed passion. She played piece after piece, some classical, some contemporary, and more of her own compositions when she felt brave enough. The luminary executives had stayed far longer than planned, ordering more bottles of wine and watching her with interest. That seemed both professional and genuine. Other diners lingered too, reluctant to break the spell that had settled over the restaurant. Last song, Mr. Reynolds told her, appearing at her side with an expression she'd never seen before. Something close to respect. Make it count. Liv nodded, taking a deep breath as she considered what to play. For her final piece, she chose another of her own compositions, one she'd written just after leaving the conservatory, when her grief was still raw and her future uncertain. It was a piece about endings and beginnings, about closing one door and finding the courage to open another. As she played the opening notes, she looked around the restaurant, taking in the scene. Danny and the kitchen staff had emerged to listen, standing in a small cluster near the swinging doors. Kai and the other servers had paused in their closing duties, watching her with open admiration. At the bar, even the usually grumpy bartender had stopped polishing glasses to listen. And at the VIP table, Ben Cooper was watching her with such intense focus that it made her cheeks warm. The melody built slowly, like someone finding their footing on uncertain ground. Then it gained confidence, soaring into a section that had always reminded Liv of sunrise, the gradual brightening of the sky after the darkest part of night. She poured everything she had into those final minutes at the piano, her gratitude for this unexpected chance, Her hope for what might come next, and most of all her love for the music itself, a love she had tried and failed to bury. When she played the final notes, letting them hang in the air before slowly fading, the restaurant erupted in applause. This time everyone was standing. Servers, kitchen staff, diners, and executives alike. Mr. Reynolds stepped forward, actually smiling as he addressed the room. Ladies and gentlemen, thank you for joining us for this special evening at Harmony. Our featured pianist tonight was our very own Liv Morgan. Featured pianist, not waitress. Liv felt a bubble of laughter rise in her throat at the absurdity of it all. As people began to gather their belongings and make their way out, many stopped by the piano to compliment her. An older woman pressed a $20 bill into her hand, insisting when Liv tried to refuse. A middle-aged couple asked if she had any recordings they could buy. A group of college students wanted to know where else she performed. To all of them, Liv could only smile and thank them, unsure how to explain that until tonight she had been nothing more than their server, invisible as she refilled water glasses and cleared plates. As the crowd thinned, Liv noticed Ben Cooper saying goodbye to his colleagues. The other executives headed for the door, but Ben hung back, checking his watch and then making his way toward the piano. Liv's heart hammered in her chest. She stood up from the bench, suddenly conscious of her waitress uniform, the blue scarf Kai had lent her now draped loosely around her shoulders. "Ms. Morgan?" Ben said as he approached, his voice warm and his handshake firm. That was quite a performance. "Thank you," she managed, feeling strangely shy now that she wasn't behind the piano. "I'm a bit out of practice." He raised an eyebrow. "If that's out of practice, I'd love to hear you when you're in form." He gestured to the bench. "Mind if we talk for a moment?" They sat side by side on the piano bench, an unusual spot for a business conversation, but somehow fitting. Up close, Liv could see that Ben was younger than she'd initially thought. Mid-30s perhaps, with kind eyes behind his dark-rimmed glasses and the faintest hint of gray at his temples. "So," he said, "how long have you been hiding your talent in a restaurant?" The question wasn't accusatory, just curious, but Liv still felt a flush creep up her neck. "I'm not hiding exactly. I just took a break from music for a while." "A break," he repeated as if testing the word. "And before this break?" Liv's fingers traced the edge of a piano key, not pressing down, just feeling its smooth surface. "I was at West Ridge Conservatory. Piano performance major." Ben nodded, recognition in his eyes. Westridge was well respected in music circles. "And you left because—" The question hung in the air between them. Liv could have given him the short version: family emergency, personal reasons, the kind of vague explanation that people usually accepted without pushing further. But something about Ben's direct gaze made her want to tell the truth. "My parents died," she said quietly. "Car accident. They were on their way to hear me play in my first major recital at the conservatory. After that, I couldn't. Music reminded me of them too much, of what they gave up to help me pursue it." Ben was silent for a moment, his expression softening. "I'm sorry for your loss." "Thank you. And yet, here you are, playing again. And not just playing, composing. Those pieces you performed tonight, the original ones, they were extraordinary." Liv looked up, surprised. "You could tell they were mine?" "I've been in this business for 15 years, Ms. Morgan. I know the standard repertoire, and I know when I'm hearing something fresh, something authentic." He smiled. "Besides, your whole demeanor changed when you played them. They clearly meant something special to you." She nodded, not trusting herself to speak. "I'd like to hear more," Ben said, his tone shifting slightly, more professional now. "Luminary is always looking for new compositional voices, particularly those that cross the boundaries between classical and contemporary. What you played tonight, it had elements of both." Liv's breath caught in her throat. "Are you offering me some kind of audition?" Ben laughed, a warm, genuine sound. "I'm offering you a conversation. No pressure, no expectations. Just a chance to talk about your music, your influences, your goals. And yes, maybe play a bit more for me in a setting that doesn't involve dinner service." He reached into his pocket and pulled out another business card, identical to the one he'd given her earlier. My cell number's on the back. Call me tomorrow and we can set something up. My treat. You've more than earned a proper lunch after. Tonight. Liv took the card, her fingers trembling slightly. Thank you. I will. Ben stood, buttoning his jacket. Good. And Liv? Whatever you decide to do with your music going forward, whether it involves Luminary or not, don't take another break. The world needs to hear what you have to say. With that, he gave her a small nod and headed for the door, leaving Liv sitting at the piano, clutching his business card like a talisman. She might have sat there all night, trying to process everything. That had happened if Kai hadn't appeared beside her with a broom in hand. Earth to live, he said, waving a hand in front of her face. You planning to move in here? She blinked, coming back to reality. Sorry, just thinking. About your impending music career? Kai grinned. I overheard a bit. Lunch with Ben Cooper. Huh? That's major. It's just a conversation, Liv said, but she couldn't help smiling. Sure. And this is just a broom, not a magical cleaning wand. Kai rolled his eyes. Come on, superstar. Help me close up so we can get out of here. I want to hear everything Ben said word for word. As they cleaned up, other staff members stopped by to congratulate Liv. Danny emerged from the kitchen, apron off and bag in hand, to give her an uncharacteristic hug. Don't you dare serve another plate in this place, the chef told her. If Reynolds tries to put you back on waitress duty tomorrow, we'll all quit in protest. Liv laughed, touched by the support. Let's not get ahead of ourselves. It was one night. One night that changed everything, Danny replied with certainty. Trust me on this. Even Mr. Reynolds seemed transformed as he counted out the register. Good work tonight, Morgan, he said, actually looking her in the eye. The bar sales alone were double our usual Thursday, and the Luminary people left their business cards with me too. Said they might want to book the space for future events. That's great, Liv said, wondering if his newfound appreciation would translate to a raise if she did end up staying. But would she stay? The question followed her as she finished her closing duties, as she gathered her things from her locker, as she said goodnight to her coworkers. Outside, the night air was cool on her face. The street was quiet now, most businesses closed, the occasional car passing by. Liv stood for a moment, looking up at the stars, faint through the city lights but still there, still shining. 24 hours ago, she had been just a waitress, going through the motions of a life she'd settled for. Now, she held a different future in her hands. Uncertain? Yes, but full of possibilities she had long ago stopped allowing herself to imagine. She reached into her pocket and touched Ben's business card, making sure it was still there, that she hadn't dreamed the whole thing. As she began the walk to her apartment, Liv found herself humming one of her compositions, the one about new beginnings. For the first time in years, the melody didn't bring pain with it, only a sense of rightness, of coming home to herself. Whatever happened tomorrow, one thing was certain. Music was back in her life, and this time, she wouldn't let it go. 6. Months later, Liv stood in the wings of a small concert hall, her heart hammering against her ribs. Through a gap in the curtain, she could see the venue was full, every seat taken with people even standing at the back. 5 minutes, the stage manager told her with a reassuring smile. Liv nodded, smoothing down the front of her midnight blue dress. It was new, bought specially for tonight. The release party for her debut album with Luminary Records. Sometimes she still couldn't believe it was real. The past 6 months had been a whirlwind. That lunch with Ben Cooper had turned into a series of meetings, then a demo recording session, and finally a contract. She'd spent weeks in the studio, working with producers and sound engineers, transforming the compositions she'd kept hidden for years into an album that would now be shared with the world. You okay? Ben asked, appearing at her side. He had become more than just her A&R director. He was her mentor, her champion within the company, and increasingly, her friend. Terrified, Liv admitted. What if they hate it? Ben chuckled. They won't. But even if some critic decides to be clever at your expense, it won't change the music. It won't change what you've accomplished. Liv took a deep breath, trying to calm her nerves. I know. It's just hard to believe this is really happening. Believe it, Ben said firmly. You earned this, Liv, every bit of it. From the stage, she heard the host begin her introduction. Ladies and gentlemen, Luminary Records is proud to present a remarkable new talent. Her debut album, Return, has already been called a stunning blend of classical technique and contemporary emotional resonance by the press. Please welcome Liv Morgan. The applause that followed was surprisingly loud for someone whose name few in the audience would have known 6 months ago. Word had been spreading in music circles about the Waitress pianist, whose original compositions had caught the ear of one of the industry's most respected A&R directors. Ben gave her shoulder a gentle squeeze. Knock 'em dead. Liv stepped onto the stage, blinking in the brightness of the lights. She made her way to the grand piano at the center and sat down, adjusting the bench slightly. Looking out at the sea of expectant faces, she spotted a group near the front. Kai, Danny, and several other staff members from Harmony, all beaming with pride. Even Mr. Reynolds had come, sitting stiffly in his suit but with the ghost of a smile on his face. He had been surprisingly supportive when she'd given her notice, even hosting a small goodbye party for her at the restaurant. Always knew you were destined for bigger things, he'd claimed, though they both knew that was far from true. Thank you all for coming tonight, Liv said into the microphone positioned near the piano. Her voice was steadier than she expected. A year ago, I was serving plates in a restaurant, convinced that my dream of being a musician was behind me. Then life gave me a second chance, and I'm so grateful to be sharing this music with you. As she placed her fingers on the keys, Liv felt a familiar sense of coming home. The fear was still there, but underneath it was something stronger. The certainty that this was exactly where she was meant to be. She began with the piece that had started it all, the composition she'd played that night at Harmony when the room had fallen silent. It flowed from her fingers more confidently now, refined through hours in the studio but still carrying the raw emotion that had inspired it. As she played, Liv thought about the journey that had brought her here. The path hadn't been straight or easy. There had been moments of doubt, days when she'd questioned whether she was making the right choice, nights when she'd woken in a cold sweat, certain she was setting herself up for heartbreak again. But music had pulled her forward, one note at a time. Midway through her set, Liv paused to take a sip of water. The next piece is called After Rain, and it's dedicated to my parents, she said, her voice soft but clear. They gave everything to support my music, and though they're not here to see this night, I know they're listening. This was the piece she'd been most nervous about including on the album, a raw emotional exploration of grief and healing that she'd written in the weeks after that first night at Harmony. Ben had insisted it be the centerpiece of the album, calling it the kind of music that changes people. As she played the opening chords, Liv closed her eyes, letting herself feel the full weight of her journey, the loss that had derailed her, the years spent hiding from her own talent, and finally the courage to begin again. When she opened her eyes midway through the piece, she saw what she'd seen that night at Harmony, a room gone completely still, people leaning forward, in their seats, some with tears streaming down their faces. She hadn't frozen the room with fear or shock, but with recognition, the universal understanding of what it means to lose something precious and find your way back to joy. After the final note faded, there was a moment of complete silence. Then applause erupted, people rising to their feet, their faces showing that her music had touched something real in them. For her final piece, Liv chose something new, a composition she'd finished just weeks ago, inspired by her new life and the unexpected turns that had brought her here. It was hopeful and complex, weaving together threads from her classical training with influences from jazz and contemporary styles. As she played the final chords, Liv felt a sense of completion. Not an ending, but the closing of one chapter and the opening of another. The standing ovation lasted long enough to make her blush. Ben appeared with a bouquet of flowers, and the label executives made brief speeches about how proud they were to have her on their roster. Through it all, Liv stood with a mix of disbelief and deep gratitude. trying to absorb every moment of this night she had never thought would come. After the formal part of the evening ended, the event shifted to a reception in the adjoining room. People lined up to speak with Liv, to have her sign their newly purchased copies of her album, to share how her music had moved them. "I knew it," Kai said when he finally reached her, pulling her into a hug. "The moment you sat down at that piano at Harmony, I knew this was going to happen." "You did not," Liv laughed. "You were as shocked as everyone else." Details, he waved dismissively. "The important thing is, you're where you belong. Now." Danny was next, less demonstrative but no less sincere. "Proud of you, kid," the chef said gruffly, "though I miss having someone who actually understands my obscure movie references in the kitchen." "I miss your pasta," Liv admitted. "Then, come by sometime," Danny said. "Your table will always be waiting." As the evening wound down, Liv found herself standing at the edge of the room, watching the remaining guests with a sense of wonder. 6 months ago, she had been invisible to people like this, just another server bringing their meals. Now, they were buying her album, asking for her autograph, speaking about her music with genuine appreciation. Ben joined her, handing her a glass of champagne. "Congratulations," he said, clinking his glass against hers. "How does it feel?" Liv considered the question. "Surreal," she said finally, "but also right, like I've found my way back to myself." "That comes through in your music," Ben said. "That's why people respond to it. It's authentic." They stood in comfortable silence for a moment, watching the crowd. "You know," Ben said thoughtfully, "we've had a request from Harmony. They want you to come play there again. Special appearance by their famous former waitress. What do you think?" Liv smiled, memories of that life-changing night washing over her. "I'd like that," she said. "Full circle." "We could do it next month after the Chicago shows," Ben suggested, "though they might need to upgrade that piano of theirs if you're going to perform on it again." "No," Liv said, shaking her head. "I want it to be exactly the same. That piano, it changed my life." As the night came to a close and the last guests departed, Liv found herself alone in the concert hall, drawn back to the piano on stage. The Yao cleaning crew was beginning their work, but they nodded respectfully when she sat down at the bench again. In the empty hall, she played softly, not one of her album pieces, but a simple melody she'd loved as a child, one of the first things her mother had taught her. The notes echoed in the space, a private celebration of how far she'd come. When she finished, she noticed one of the cleaning staff had paused her work to listen. "That was beautiful," the young woman said shyly. "I play a little too. Nothing like you, though." Liv smiled, remembering herself at Harmony, hiding her talent, afraid to believe in second chances. "Keep playing," she told the woman. "You never know where it might lead you." As she left the concert hall that night, album release party behind, her and a tour ahead, Liv looked up at the stars, brighter here than they had been outside Harmony 6 months ago. Her path had changed so dramatically since that night, from a waitress with a hidden talent to a recording artist with a future, full of possibilities. Life didn't always give second chances, but when it did, when the universe conspired to put you exactly where you needed to be, even if it was just behind a piano in a restaurant on a night when nothing had gone as planned, the only thing to do was play your heart out and see what happened next. For Liv Morgan, what happened next was everything she had once stopped believing was possible, and it had all started when she was just a waitress, until her piano performance made the whole room freeze.